Hi everyone, I'm Katie Teitler with Tax Cyber, and I'm here today with my good friend and industry colleague, Michael Santarcangelo. Hi, Michael.
It's
Good to
nice to
see
be
you.
here. It's nice
Good,
to see
good.
you. It'd be better if we were
Yeah.
hanging out in person, but this will work.
Eventually, we will hang out in person. For now, we will virtually chat. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership, a little bit about communication, and your biggest hot topic is understanding your value. So we have this nice audience that's listening and watching us, and you and I have known each other for years. And it
Yep.
started back, gosh, I think 2016. You spoke for me at an event you filled in last minute, literally 2 days' notice, to present a 2-day cloud workshop.
I remember it well.
Yeah, it was a little crazy. But this information for everybody watching is important because Michael has a long and varied career in security. He's covered it all. He's been a consultant, he's been an advisor, he worked with ISC Squared. You wrote some of the CISSP at one point. You've been a journalist, you've been an editor, you've been a reporter, and now you have your own firm, Security Catalyst. So tell everybody what it is you do and why.
Yeah. It's great, and it's interesting because I had to figure out last week. I've been doing this for 24 years, and it's I know for some of you that's kind of short, and for some of you you're right there with me, and for a lot of people it's like, how do you do the same thing for 24 years? The trick is it hasn't been the same thing, and when you ask like what do I do now with Security Catalyst, it's interesting because I actually debated if I was going to keep that over the last year or two. And as the pandemic set in, it gave me the chance to go inward and really look at it. So what I do is I help security leaders deliver recognized business value. The way I ask it is, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, I have no idea if it makes a sound or not. But if you've completed a project and you're excited about it and no one understands it, you didn't complete any actual business value. It has to be recognized. And I think so. You ask why. It, it's interesting because I tried looking at it from the like really positive and upbeat. Oh, I no, it's simpler. It makes me angry that we have really polished, awesome security leaders and teams that are feeling defeated and chewed up and spit out. They're losing their weekends, they're working nights, they're leading into all these dark areas because they don't see their value. The companies don't see their value, and they're just really getting frustrated and burned out. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so, it's actually getting in touch with a lot of that in the last year has really reignited me to look at a lot of this stuff differently. And that's what I get the chance to do. It's trying to make that difference.
Do you think some of the problem, obviously it's about value, it's about communication, but do you think it's partially baked into the profession where the absence of something happening in some senses means you're doing well versus if you're making money, obviously financially that's recognizable. If you're making a product, every step along the development path, you have something to show. It's starting from a plan and an idea, and then you create the first thing and then the second thing, and it grows and grows. In security, it's literally, we have nothing to show today, so we win.
I, you know, I know a lot of people argue that really successfully, and there's some logic behind that. I think that made a lot more sense 20 or 25 years ago when security was a small function. When I made the decision, if it was a decision, to focus on security, I remember being counseled that that was the dumbest thing ever. I was career limiting. I was going to be pigeonholed. There was no future in it. So I think, that's obviously not proven accurate. I mean, back then in the late 90s, if you said you're in security, the first question was, what are you, a security guard? And then it turned to all sorts of other things, but we didn't think of it in terms of what we today call cybersecurity. Back then, if you were in security, you could more or less do it all. There was a lot of generality to it, whereas today there's a lot of specialty to it. So, do I think that it's baked into the profession that trying to prove a negative is an almost impossible task. I think it's a prevailing mindset. I'm not sure that it's a fundamental truth of the industry. And here's why. People, when they say cyber, right? And I've said this before with you and other places, they hear spider. And all that's changed now is I can't kill it or kill it with fire. I go, spiders, I'm told, are good for the garden. I mean, I don't want them in my house, but oh, okay. But that doesn't transcend into, and so I understand it and I want it and we should have more of it and I know its value. So I think what's happened was because it was so technical, because it was a checkbox, because there were things that we were looking to provide, and as long as we checked the box, people were like, okay, keep your head down, keep going. We never had to say, but what's the business problem we're solving? And how does this connect to that business problem? How would we see that? How would we show that? What does that look and feel like? And so I think some of it's the way we came about it. And I think some of it's the way that we continue to go about it because it is complex. I mean, look, make no mistake, security is hard. Security is complex. Security is complicated, and it's shifting and changing, and it feels like nonstop. And yet, you talk to people that have been doing this for 2 decades, and they'll say nothing has changed in the last 20 years. We're still having the same conversations. And yet, everything has changed in the last 20 years. We're having similar conversations, but everything has changed. And I think if you can flip that bit, you'll start to see that there is a path to value. It's just different than what we've been thinking about.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot that absolutely is the same and frankly will always remain the same. It's just like if we're talking about health, our fundamental health.
Sure.
We know you need to sleep and eat right. Not
Right.
all the time, but most of the time we need to exercise, we need to get in the fresh air, we need to take care of our mental health. We need to have friends and family we can talk to. There's some fundamental things that will always continue to take care of our basic health, but then new things happen. We learn new things about the science behind diet and exercise, for instance. We learn new things about preserving how we think about things and how mental health plays a role in our overall well-being, whether it's at work or at home or a combination. Same thing with cybersecurity. There's going to be fundamentals we will always have to do, even if we live to be 1,000, fundamentals will be there, but the industry is also changing and also requires new mindsets, new tools, new everything, I think.
Absolutely. Oh no, I think you're raising a really key point. The way that we approached cybersecurity in the 90s and right before we went to distributed computing versus the way that we're approaching it now in the cloud. I mean, these are inflection points. There were things that we wished we could do in the 90s. We just didn't have the process or the the compute power or the storage or any of these things that today they come on your cell phone. So everything is shifted. None of it's shifted, right? It's exactly what you're saying. There's some foundations to it, but just because in the industry somebody who spent thousands of hours studying it, probably making some mistakes, having the scars to show for it, seeing it differently than everybody else doesn't mean everybody else sees it that way yet. We're still a really young industry as compared to medicine, PS, always changing, as compared to accounting, as compared to other types of things. And so I think some of the challenge that we face is we instinctively know it's important. We don't know what it means beyond that. And so how do we navigate through that, both as an industry and within our organizations? And then how does that contribute to our sense of value or self-worth or what have you? And it's obviously complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're at once a young industry, but we've had about 30 years of maturity, so we
Yep.
can look at things differently. We're starting to look at things differently, and we've talked about business alignment and security for many, many years, but the
That's right.
idea of value and understanding your value is not something that's talked about widely. You spend a lot of time with your clients on it. And when we've spoken about it in the past, you've said, the idea is that we lose sight of our own value and it impacts how we operate, how we act personally, how we interact with others, how we react to others, whether it's our colleagues, our boss, our employees, even our families. Everything
Oh
is all connected. So let's take a step back for a minute and go back to a really simple question.
yeah.
The question is simple, the answer is hard. What is value and why is it important?
Yeah. Let me give you a really circular answer to start. The reason that I got so interested in value was when I started teaching people how to communicate. And the way that that had come about was, you know, you've known me for a long time. Anybody who knows me know I am insatiably curious. I love asking questions. In fact, I prefer asking questions and learning than trying to know things. And along the way, I started studying how to communicate better, right? So how do we write? How do we draw? How do we take photos? How do we present? How do we do that type of stuff? And through stuff I had done in the early 2000s, I got tapped to or asked, I guess I should say, hey, we have a team of risk assessors, Michael. They're really good at their jobs. But it seems that every time we present our findings, everybody smiles, nods, gives us a thumbs up, sticks it in the desk drawer, goes on. We're not getting any traction. I think they just need to learn how to present better. Can you come teach them? And so that was the birth of the first thing I had done around it. And but what we had figured out, and that was like back in 2004, and I learned a lot about our industry and how we present stuff and how other people perceive it. And then it turned into a lot of work. And so what started with speaking about security turned into communicating the value of security. And in that, it took about 3 or 4 years, but I discovered something really interesting. If I'm trying to communicate what I perceive to be the value of security to someone who is disconnected from their own value, they won't see the value in what I'm doing, or at least they won't see it easily. So then I started looking around and I went, wow, a lot of people are disconnected from their value. So one of the ways I started to test it, when we say, well, what is value? One of the common things people will say is, well, value is subjective. Yep, true statement. And value is positional. Yep, true statement. And value is transitional. It changes over time. Yeah, agreed on all of those things. Here's the corollary to that. It doesn't change nearly as much as everybody thinks it does. That's how we can establish markets for collectibles and baseball cards and stuff like that. But when it comes to ourselves, it's a little bit simpler, right? Our value is the ability to be of service. And the way that we derive our value typically comes from completing hard tasks, solving challenging problems. It can be things that are mental, it can be things that are physical. Building a deck, building a fence, mowing the lawn, going on a long bike ride. When we think about things as humans, when we can accomplish stuff in a night, in a weekend, in a week, we remodel the bathroom, we do something that's physical, right? There was a challenge, and we work through that challenge, and at the end, we can see that result, and we feel good about it. I'm not saying it was the best bathroom anybody ever did in the world, or it's the best fence ever, but we feel that sense of accomplishment. So when we start saying, what's value and how do we get disconnected from it, I think one of the challenges of knowledge work in particular is we don't tend to see the results. I think one of the then double challenges of security is we don't see the results and no one else sees the results. And in fact, if anything, it's kind of hard to show that there are any results. And what we tend to see societally today, and this happens to me as much as everybody else, we get to Friday, and what I have instead of a list of things that got done and a chance to celebrate it is I've got a list of all the things that didn't go well, all the things I didn't get done, all the stuff that has to happen next week, all the time I'm out of, and everything else. And that tends to weigh on our minds more than everything else. So what starts to happen then is if we say, so what is value and why does it matter? If we don't think of value entirely as being financial, but instead it's part of who we are, it's part of what we can contribute, right? Like maybe we'll get to it later, but we hear a lot of people talk about tribal, and I prefer community to tribes. Tribes are fine, but tribes tend to be exclusionary and communities tend to be inclusionary. But if we look at the human experience, we're designed to cooperate, which is bizarre because we teach people how to compete, not how to cooperate. But we're designed to be cooperative. And when you're designed in that way, there's three basic things, right? You have to get a sense of what your own value is. Well, how do you know your value and how do you grow your value? It's by solving hard problems and gaining experience and making mistakes and learning from it and figuring it out. Step two, you want to contribute that. You can contribute to your family, to your team, to your job, to your community, but we're contributing our value ideally to something that we believe in, to a purpose or a cause or a situation that we care about. And then we seek some form of recognition. Now, it's not the I want a plaque or the financial award for the I love me wall. It's just the subtle acknowledgement. It's being seen, right? It's somebody saying, "Hey, good job, KT. Thanks for that. I know you worked hard. I know you legged it out. I know that wasn't easy. It made a difference. That closed the deal. That protected us. Whatever it is." When you start to see those things not happening, we don't see our value. We're not contributing our value. We're not getting recognized for it. It leads to a lot of things, and there's a lot of subtleties in this, right? Like somebody says the right thing words wise, but their actions don't match up. That creates friction, right? Friction erodes value, destroys trust, burns people out. But if we just stick on the why is value important, I think it's because it's central to who we are. At the cellular level, it's growth or decay. And if we look at it then and we abstract up a little bit, so as humans, we seek growth. The way that we grow is by solving problems. So the way that we grow is to increase our value. When we increase our value, we need to contribute it. When we contribute it, we'd like to be seen for it. But that's the recognition that we belong. That's the recognition that we fit. That's the recognition that we were in fact the value. So the value is our ability to be of service, and it's important because kind of that's why we exist at some level. Like lest we get into like a really big existential conversation.
But in terms of value, it's perception, it's subjective, obviously. And in security in particular, there is a belief in the security industry, whether it's a tribe or a community, there is a belief that we're offering a value as practitioners that others don't see. And
Yeah, I
that's
think
been
it's
a
fair.
major source of friction, I think, for a lot of people. It leads to burnout, it leads to
Yeah.
questioning one's self-worth. It leads to a lot of things that I do want to get into with you, but how do you create value if you feel like you're the only one who understands your value, or people who are like you, they're the only ones who see your value, but in service of the organization? Maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's the board, maybe it's your line of business colleagues. They don't see it because they don't understand it, or you don't think they understand what you're bringing to the table, how you're helping the business, whether it's make a new widget or gain new customers, whatever the goal, the mission of the business may be.
Yep. All right. So first, no question, what we do in security is valuable. It's highly valuable. Most organizations wouldn't exist if we weren't there providing what we provide. But it's the second part that I think is the more fascinating part. It's not recognized. It's not understood. It's not realized. Yeah. So the mistake we make then is, well, I told them and they don't understand, so they must not care. Wrong slippery slope. We told them. Well, did we present it? Did we explain it? Did we translate it? Did we explain it in a way that they understood? And typically the answer there is no.
But I want to stop you there. It's not even did I present it in a way that they understood, or did I educate? Because we've been coming up against this problem in security awareness for 2 decades, right? I told them, or I took the time, or we tested them.
Sure.
It's also making that connection to what matters to them. Because like with security awareness training, you can test them all you want, but they're never going to care in the same way you do. And it's not necessarily their job. So where is that in the spectrum of I took the time, I explained it, and how does that translate into their seeing the value, their being, other people in our organizations?
Right. So there's a bunch of pieces in that. Let me try to pick our path through it.
Okay.
So the first thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the people that we're attempting to demonstrate the value to themselves are disconnected from their own value. That necessarily makes it significantly harder, if not almost impossible, for us to help them see the value of what we're doing. That's the first part. But when you asked about what I did, and I said I help security leaders deliver recognized business value, the key in it is exactly that. It's that recognition. So it's about what's the story that we're telling, And in that story is the second part to this, which is, did we show our work? Now, you brought up security awareness and stuff around that. I'm going to set that aside because I think it's a different beast. And I have some fairly strong opinions on it that probably don't match most of the industry, which would surprise most people because I focus on the communication side of things. But let's set that aside for now, and let's focus on, if you're a team, you're doing security and you're delivering results, and you want the business, right, the business leaders, the executives, the board, to recognize that in a way that's meaningful. So the question then is, how are you doing that? And one of the things that I find kind of interesting is we struggle as an industry to show our work. You know, if you think about it, it's kind of like, at least when I was younger and we learned math, we used to have to work the problems out, and we'd have to show the steps, show our work, show what we were doing, and then explain why that was the step that we were taking to get to either the next step or the outcome. And that did two things. It helped us see it and groove it in, but it also helped somebody else see it, either to go, oh, I get how you're doing that. Now I know how to do it. Or for an instructor or a teacher, somebody to look at it and say, but you missed the step, or whatever. You know, it's been interesting, but as I've been talking to more security leaders about this, and specifically pinpointing, yeah, where's this friction coming from? A lot of times what happens in security is somebody chucks it over the wall. We want to be of value, we want to show our value, and we get it done. We never show people that, by the way, we worked 15-hour days for 3 months to do it, working way beyond surge capacity, eating up nights and weekends, and trying to get all the things done. So all that happens is it gets done. People go, okay, cool. And then they throw more at you because they didn't understand it in the first place. They don't understand it as an outcome. They didn't understand any part of the process of it. And so as a result of that, it makes it tougher for us because we get more and more disconnected. We get more and more buried under it all. And then they just keep asking for more, and it feels impossible. The old, well, I got to do more with less resources, less time, less everything. And so it's kind of like we've got to go backwards. And that might be what your next question is, but I don't know. Did that start to give you some context into it, or do you
I
want to
think
push deeper on
so.
it?
I think so. So I guess the next question is, how are your clients perceiving themselves as it relates to value? How are they either disconnected from it and they're working through it, or in the success story use case, how are some of these security executives, security leaders getting there to perceive their own value and understand their own value?
Well, let me, I've got to be pretty thinly or pretty deeply veiled about this, but let me. So I was working with the security team, and I think this is a great example for everybody to think about. If I come to you and I say, "What's the purpose of your security? What's the purpose of your team?" The answer isn't security, cybersecurity, compliance, or any of these other types of things. That's not it. The question is, how are you connected to the purpose of the business? So I worked with a security leader. He was brought in new, and during the process had interviewed with the CEO. And so I specifically said, well, cool. Did you ask the CEO why? Why you? Why hire for this position? Why care in the first place? And I don't remember if he had done it originally or not, but he had a good relationship with the CEO and essentially went and asked that question. Now, there were a couple rounds in this, but here's what it distilled down to. Between the CEO's conversations with this security leader and a few other people, what we were able to come up with is there were three basic functions of the security team. First and foremost, it needed to meet client requirements. They were a business-to-business operation. Security was not what they offered, but the security of the solution, the security of the product was paramount to the overriding majority of their contracts. So from a CEO's perspective, he needed some level of confidence that security was able to meet the client requirements that would allow them to gain the contracts. The second thing was, I feel like it was something along the lines of like, keep me out of the papers. But what it really translated into, because we pushed on that, it was, I want you to be just ahead of the curve enough that there's no surprises. In fact, I'd like you to be just ahead of the curve enough that when our ahead of the curve clients ask questions, we can nod and say, yep, we're already tracking it. Yep, we're already there. Right now, as an adjunct to this, there's this whole conversation around, are you on the curve, ahead of the curve, or behind the curve? And what he's saying is, I'd like you just positioned in front of the curve so that we're prepared for whatever comes down the road, whether it's a change in a regulation, it's some major hack that rolls out across the world, or it's just a targeted attack on us, whatever, keep us, ahead of that. But the third one was the most interesting to me, and we pressed on it the hardest, and it was a true statement. I want security to be our competitive differentiator. So we pressed on it, and we pressed on it with the entire executive team, and it came back as, well, our clients really care about security. So, right now we can compete on, we're meeting your requirements, and we have a very friendly call center, and we have a great staff, and we're really nice people, and so you should do business with us. He said, but the CEO and the chair of the board thought that what was going to come down, what was going to be really important was, did we actually incorporate security into our operations? Was it there for everybody? So that changed ultimately the models that we used and the ways that we adopted it, the ways that we explained it inside of the organization. And his plan was, 2-3 years, but make those changes, because by the time that becomes so important, if our competitors haven't done this, they can't catch us. They can't move fast enough. There won't be anything they can do. So I want that. Okay, so armed with this, then the purpose of security went from, we're like, here to secure all the stuff, and it's really complex and we've got to do everything. It came down to, most importantly, meet client requirements. Second, keep us just ahead of the curve. And third, start thinking about how we differentiate. What that means then is that from a security perspective inside the team, anybody on that team, what you're working on should match one or more of those things. And if you have to choose, number one, meet client requirement is always the top requirement. So now what happens is when the CISO goes out and talks to sales, he always got to open up his presentations or discussions by saying, hey, I just want to remind everybody, I'm here to serve you. And what we're trying to do is make sure our clients' needs are met. That's always going to be first and foremost for me and my team. If we're not doing that, you let me know. If there's something we need to do, you let me know. We're going to get it done. Second thing is, I want to just keep us a little bit ahead of the curve. I'll work with you on a cadence for what that looks like. And then, of course, we're looking for ways to be competitively differentiated. Always curious about what you think. We did something for marketing. They said, hey, can you do this externally? Open with the same thing. Because, right, a lot of times what you'll see is in security, we'll say, well, here's the state of security, and here's how bad it is, and here's all the horrible stuff, and whatever. We took a different approach. Basically said, hey, we're in security, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable working with us, that your needs are met, that we're just anticipating those changes, and that we're here with you for the long haul. So, hey, let me tell you what we're doing and why and what we're excited about and how we think this is going to matter to you. They actually had 2 people like renew deals just as a result of that brief webinar with the security leader, because they were like, wow, that's what we're looking for. The sales team came back. There was an area where we had some improvement. We made remarkable improvement, went right to the CEO and said, wow, this security team is crushing it for us. This is exactly what we needed. This has shortened our path so much. It's reduced our overhead. Our clients are closing faster. It's less stress on my team. This is phenomenal. What else are you guys working on? So here's the difference. Here's what it boils down to. If you want to deliver something that's recognized, it's got to be, right, you said already, right, business alignment. It's got to be aligned with what's important to the business. That means we have to go ask the business what's important to them. Here's the interesting thing. This CEO knew what was important, and it was good. I still hold this out as a great example. A lot of folks, when we ask that, will say, I don't know. And it's because they don't know. So it creates both an opportunity and a challenge. In security now, to be successful, you still have to be technical, and you've got to know how to apply it in your situation. But you got to start understanding the business. You got to understand the challenges of marketing and the challenges of sales and the challenges of delivery and the challenges of development, but from their perspectives, not from our perspectives, to start looking for those areas to then posit ideas or offer stuff up to people to then figure out how we can alleviate problems for them. And just as one more quick point, a lot of people say security doesn't work that way. Security is always a negative. It has to be. That's not true at all. A lot of times what happens is I'm not sure I like the whole, like, we're the brakes on the car to go faster. No, do it this way. There's things that they're concerned about. And if we can reduce those concerns or speed their ability to do something, and they can get the market faster, or they can sell more, or they can sell bigger deals, then security is actually really well positioned. It's not a negative. Oh yeah, they might have to take a step or authenticate or work through any of these technologies that we could talk about for the rest of the day. But what we're really saying is, did we bring the right solution to bear for them to help them achieve their outcome in a way that they felt good about, in a way that they could measure, in a way that they showed, yeah, good, that was success. That's our best opportunity. It's also where we tend to struggle.
how is it, how can your client, how are your clients, or how can people overcome some of these problems? Because what you said a couple of minutes ago was really interesting. When they go to the CEO and they say, what are your priorities? What are your challenges? What do you need us to help you with? There are a lot of people who are going to work every day. They know what they have to do. They don't necessarily know why they do it.
Mhm.
They're doing
Yeah.
it because we all need a job. So if they don't understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and their value, their either individual value as an employee, as a person, or their team's value, how does that change, or doesn't it, how we approach helping people solve their problems? If they don't
Oh, it totally
understand their
changes it.
value.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm really glad you said it that way. Let me make a note too. In this case, in the example I just gave you, we had a great relationship. I say we, but really the security leader already had a great relationship with the CEO, made it easy to go back to the CEO and say, hey, what do you need from us? I don't suggest that that's the right strategy for everybody. There's a number of ways to try to figure that out, but I want to push in on what you just said. So if I'm part of the security team and I'm kind of struggling, like, yeah, I show up and I've got things I got to get done, right? I wrote my OKRs for the quarter, or I've got my annual goals or whatever they are, and I'm just going to put my head down and execute against them. And I'm not sure how they connect or why they matter or if I matter or if any of it matters. Every time I talk to somebody who tells me that they're leaving a position, it's almost always because they don't feel like they're growing. They don't understand if they're doing anything, right? They're not contributing value. They don't feel like they're contributing value. They don't even know why they're there anymore or if they matter. And PS, no one even cares. Like no one's even noticing this. So to me, yeah, that's a base level thing. I kind of break it into what I call, and I like alliteration, right? So I call it program, which is what's the purpose, right? Program purpose, and then prime projects, or what are your priorities, and then what's your pacing. This is where we get into a lot of challenges. And this is interesting because I don't think this part's limited to just security teams. I think it just compounds it for us. We are trying to do too much, right? So if we look at a current situation, you need a certain amount of slack in your day and in your week to handle chaos, to handle uncertainty, to handle, especially in security. There's incidents, there's impacts, there's stuff we didn't see coming. But you know that it's coming. You don't know what's coming, but you know something's coming, and you got to have some slack. Yeah, most of us don't have slack. Now, when an incident hits, you might need to surge up. You got to work a little bit more. Maybe you borrow from the margins or not. I can't tell you how many teams that I'm talking to are working at or above surge capacity. Folks, if you're in a car and it redlines, the engine blows up. I'm not suggesting we're cars, but golly, there's only so much we can do before we blow up or burn out, or right as you said, KT, like we start it takes its toll on our colleagues and our families and our lives and our decisions and everything else. But the third part is we need downtime, and we need time to think. We need time to process. We need time to level up and to upskill and to just recharge our batteries. So here's what happens when I go into a lot of teams now. And one of the things that, quick on this is assessments are good. Assessments have a place. Assessments typically say, hey, I'm going to use NIST. I'll use CSF of NIST. I'll use CIS top 20. I'll pick whatever you like, and we're going to come in and we're going to assess your performance against that. That's great, and that allows you to demonstrate progress. It allows you to show things to somebody else. Here's one of the challenges that happens to us in security related to all of this. We open with, well, here's all our gaps. Here's everything we didn't do. Man, we are good at focusing at the negative. And I get it. Our job is risk. We're wired a little differently. Our brains see it a little bit differently. We see the downsides to stuff. The challenge with that is a lot of times you already felt like you had an impossible load, an impossible task, and now you've got even more things to add to it and whatnot. So one of the things that I've been really cautious about is, for me, it's diagnosis. I like to say prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And it's the same concept. You're not trying to do an assessment against some external standard. You're trying to diagnose the situation. It really comes down to, do you know what the purpose of your team is? And what's that story like? Can you tell that story? How consistently do you tell the story? Is your team in alignment with it or not? Most teams I work with, that's a big, we got work to do here, Michael, but hey, we got other stuff that's more important. We can agree to disagree on that. By the way, you can always work it in parallel. Second part though is do you have 3 or less key things that need to get done? And I haven't talked to a team yet that's got 3. I get anywhere from 20 to 30 to I can't even count that high. And the thing is, if we're really candid about it, that means you're going to fail at like, 29 out of the 30. Now, we have different really cool ways to handle failure in technology in general, so no worries. And then the one that we're going to call a success, almost always over budget, under scope, over timeline, but hey, it's done and good job,
And
everybody.
isn't that also a result of having too many priorities,
Yeah,
having, but by definition, you can't have many priorities, right? So we've
yeah,
actually taken the true meaning of the word priority and
that's exactly
changed
right.
it to fit our modern society.
If
But
everything's a
isn't
priority,
that,
nothing is.
yeah, exactly. And so doesn't that, hey, we've done this one thing and we've done it really well, but we're over budget, we're over time. Isn't that a direct result of
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. And in fact, you know what
how do
else it's a
we
direct
how do we
result of?
change that?
All right, well, let's talk about that. But here's another thing that's a direct result of. I said we're going to do X, and everybody nodded their heads. It's like saying I'm going to go paint the car blue. Which color blue? Right? I mean, when we were kids, I mean, maybe we could have argued Crayola only had 5 shades of blue. What's Pantone got today? They've got what, 64 million colors out of 3 primary colors. How many different shades of blue? And even if we keep it simpler, there's a big difference between sky blue and navy blue, and maybe royal blue in the middle. So if we say blue and everybody has a completely different image and a very contrasted image in their head of what blue looks like, then when we get done and go, all right, I painted the room blue, if we never clarified what success looked like or how we were going to measure it or how we would realize it, we've set ourselves up. So not only are we trying to do too much stuff at once, we're using words that sound good, that we think everybody understands because they nodded their heads, and it starts to fall apart. So here's the second interesting thing though about that. Like, what do we do about it? Well, security has this really nasty reputation of saying no to everything and stomping our feet and slamming the table. And I've actually sat through meetings where people did exactly that. It was really uncomfortable.
Still in 2021, because we talked
No,
about
this
this
was
in,
this was thankfully a long time ago. But I still do see it. I talk to people who think their job is to say no, their job is to protect people, their job is to do whatever. But let's just say we've inherited that residue, we've inherited that legacy, that there's enough people in the industry in leadership positions that had that run in the last 20 years, where security got in their way, security slowed them down, security did whatever. We know this. And so if you're in a leadership position today, the last thing you want to do is say no. The last thing you want to do is be that person because you're so excited that people are calling you. And I've talked to a lot of leaders that say, hey, man, if they call, we got to figure it out. We just got to say yes. Yeah, so here's the problem with that, right? If everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. If you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And now the question is, what are you saying yes to? Now, what we also face is what I call, right? I call it the unholy trinity: chaos, friction, resistance. So chaos is just all the stuff happening around us in the organization, in the world. I think the last year has been a pretty good example of chaos. Friction is what we're talking about. Friction is it's mismatch between expectations and experience. It's a mismatch between words and their meaning. It's comes down to communication, technology, and process, and where those mismatches are. And the friction is what erodes the value, it destroys the trust, and it burns people out. But that last part is the resistance. That's that stupid little voice in our head that tells us we're not good enough, or that sabotages us, or they're not going to like it. It's when you become a new security leader and you say, I need help, but I can't ask for it because they just promoted me, and if I ask for help, it'll show that I'm weak and nobody will like me. Uh, no, that's not how this works. But man, that voice in your head is super, super convincing. And the problem is the more chaos and friction you have, the more foothold resistance has to get in there. Oh, and then they have this really cool cousin, the tyranny of the urgent. Everything, right? So not only is everything a priority, everything needed to be done yesterday, and it needs to be done now, and it needs your attention. And we're constantly battering people about this. So now what happens is if you're in security today, a lot of people describe it like this: on Sunday night, I don't want to go to work on Monday. And on Monday, I'm just waiting for who's going to punch me first. and where they're going to punch me and how many hits I'm going to take. And I'm always on my back foot and I can never regain my breath. I can't get my balance, right? KT, you understand boxing. You don't want to be on your back foot, right? And they can't seem to get out of that. So the question is, how do you do it? You first of all, you got to give yourself permission to accept this is not tolerable and this is not the way it has to be. It does not have to be this way. The challenge is we can't do everything, even though we're trying to. I've got 99 plates spinning. I'm going to put 2 more up and hopefully nothing breaks. But if it does, all right, well, we'll deal with it. Wow. Okay. We have to say it doesn't have to be this way, but then we got to get really clear on what those 3 things are. And then we have to develop some systems around. So what are we saying yes to? What are we saying no to? Or I prefer to tell people it's not no, it's just not yet. It's not now, right? Because it's nicer. But by the way, right? So what, as a quick aside, and this would be a much deeper conversation, it's how do we triage the stuff that's coming into us? Do we even have a system or a method for triaging it? Go back to it. If you're so cleanly defined as to know that my job is to meet client requirements, something comes into me and it's a client requirement, hey, that gets moved pretty high up on the list. Something comes in and I don't know, somebody was just upset with us. Well, maybe that's pretty low on the list. That might be a no thank you. Do we have the insights, right? I call it the guidance to be able to triage. If you don't, it's tough to know what you're saying yes to relative to what you're saying no to because it's a system. You don't have a systematic way of dealing with it. But then when something comes in, if it is a yes, okay, then something else has to get deprioritized, unless it's these rare occasions where you need to use a little bit of surge capacity and get over it. But there's 2 more pieces to triage. It's I heard you. Let me help direct you to the right person or to the right whatever. And the third one is, ooh, that sounds great. Or you don't have to lie if you don't think it sounds great. It's I'm not sure we have capacity for that today. Maybe you have a process. Maybe there's an intake. Maybe because sometimes when people come to you in security because they need something, they might have the budget to hire an outside firm or to pay you to hire some consultants or whatever sort of help you need. So again, just telling them to pound sand doesn't particularly help, but also just agreeing to it doesn't particularly help. It could be we're running at capacity right now. Help me understand the priority this is for you, and let's see what we can figure out together. Sometimes the common answer, that simple approach results in that makes sense. Yeah, look, it's not that important to me right now, but can I come back to you when it gets more important? Of course. Yeah. Hey, do you want to grab a lunch? We'll talk about it, right? I'd love to learn more about what you're working on. Yeah, it turns out fun. A lot of times people ask for stuff, and if our answers are, yep, you got it, and we don't at least say, what problem are you trying to solve? What would success look like? How valuable, right? Value and priority go hand in hand. The more valuable something is, the higher the priority. So where's this on a priority? It's super priority. Okay. What does that look like? How does that connect to X, Y, and Z? And we're not comfortable asking those questions because we've never asked those questions. Like it's a lot of the stuff that we need to do to be more effective at it. It's not that we're broken or we're not good enough. It's that we've never learned to ask some of the questions that let us connect ourselves to the value or that give us the ability to understand what somebody else is trying to do so we can be of service to them.
It's a Kanban board approach.
It can be, sure.
Yeah, to managing yourself, your team, your priorities, expectations within the business. And if you tie that all back to the reason for being, what the business priorities are, what the CEO has said you need to do, or what your colleagues have raised their hand and said, this is most important for me, the value is tied to that. And then the Kanban board style of managing is, what can we bring to the top of the list based on what's valuable to the business, and what can we move later? But the trick here is also making sure that as you're adding, you're also subtracting, because otherwise you have this Kanban board that's miles long and we're in the same place. So reducing that friction by understanding what's important, what's not, or what's not right now. And that.
Yeah, I love that for so many reasons, but and you don't have to be an agile shop or anything else. All right, Kanban is awesome, just because it allows you to visualize it. And one of the things I think is most underappreciated is that visual nature of it. And if you understand how to limit work in progress so that you can actually finish, right? Finishing feels good. You can get to Friday and you can look at all the things that moved across the board. Might only be one, but that's a record of your success. But it also gives you something that you can show people your work, and at least you can point to it and say, there's no way to do it. When I started doing this, I started using it for myself personally, just as a personal Kanban board, I don't know, a decade ago. And it was fascinating because KT, like you said, I did, sticky notes on a wall, blue painter's tape to mark out all the different columns. And it was astonishing to me how much I thought I could get accomplished in a week. And after working through it for like about a year, I could look at the beginning of my week and say, I have set myself up for failure. Okay, let me reprioritize based on value. Also knowing where I wanted to be in a month, 2 months, 6 months, or whatever. And let's work back and focus on the important stuff, and let me get it done. Let me feel good about it. So I love that. Anything that helps visualize what we're trying to do and lets us then explain it to somebody else and show them, huge opportunities there.
Good. Well, Michael, thank you. We could go on for
We
weeks
could.
on these topics, and I know you and I will probably personally and offline here. But thank you. This has been really fun. We'll dig in more at a later time and talk about some of these other things that you're thinking about and you're working on
Sure.
with your clients. And for everybody watching, I hope you learned something new. Thanks for spending the time with me and Michael today. If you want to get in touch with Michael, he's Security Catalyst. What's the best way to get in touch with you if people want to follow up?
securitycatalyst.com. I'm on LinkedIn at my full name. I changed it off as Security Catalyst. So if you can spell Santarcangelo, you can find me, because surprisingly, there's not a lot of us. And on Twitter, I'm at Catalyst.
All right, cool. Great. Well, again, Michael, thank you. Thanks to everybody watching and listening, and we'll see you here on the next video chat.